Hi, I'm Paul, and if you've ever felt overwhelmed by life's complexities, you're not alone. Today I'm diving into Mark Manson's powerful book, Everything is F, a book about hope. This isn't just another self-help guide. Manson explores profound insights into human resilience and hope amidst chaos. By the end of this video, you'll grasp the key lessons from Manson's work and understand how they can reshape your perspective on life. Join me as we unpack the wisdom and raw honesty of this transformative book. It might just change your perspective on life. I'm now going to take you into Obsidian Canvas, where you can see my mind map for the book. We'll start off by looking at the book cover, Everything is F, the book about hope by Mark Manson. We can see here to the right-hand side, I've placed a card, which is a note within my second brain. And I can open this note by right-clicking and left-clicking, open a new tab. That brings up my literature note. I read this book in January this year, 2024. I've given it a few tags here, such as book, documentary, self-development, mindfulness, and I've linked it to specific topics within my second brain: happiness, mindfulness, and hope. I've also got a placeholder for Mark Manson. This was how I used to do my meta information before I started using YAML in my header of my note. So this is a lot cleaner, and this is the way that you should do it, especially when you bring online plugins such as DataView later on down the track. So we'll just close those properties here, and then we can just skim down and we can see that I've broken out 9 best ideas from the book. From there, I've taken one tool, what's in it from me, and then I've got a little bit of a reflection, all the highlights from reading this book on my Kindle. As I've dot pointed all my highlights, I've actually put in internal links into my second brain, which links to specific topics or ideas or concepts throughout my second brain. So we've got happiness here. That's just a little note about what happiness is. The different authors that have written about happiness, some action items below that. So I do that with a lot of my notes throughout my book. And you see I've done the same for purpose here as well. Got authors, books, and action items. Anything in italics in purple there is something that really resonated with me when I was reading the book. Now, text on a page is very difficult to understand. I'm a visual thinker, and that's why I build mind maps from my book notes. So we can see, if I close this now, we can see that that's my initial note broken out into these 9 best ideas, which come out into this group here, 9 best ideas. So we've got what's in it for me. You can open that as its own note by right-clicking and open a new tab. And that's much the same as my main book note here, but this one is just about what's in it for me, which is discovering how hope gets in the way of living a satisfying life. And there's just a little bit of a quote from the book, a bit of a description about Mark pointing out that there's been a lot of progress worldwide in the past couple of generations, especially in the areas of poverty and starvation and child mortality, yet we still see rising rates of depression and anxiety all around us. So that's just that first section there. Now, once again, it's just text. Good to have it here as a placeholder, but if we develop that further, what's in it for me, we come up here to this other group, what's in it for me. Now, this is a visual representation of that note. This is how I like to structure my book summaries and learning. So you can see here that I've got a little start card here, and it just allows me to flow through the chapter and cover all the main points of the book. Most of us have hopes and dreams of a better future. But what if those hopes are actually getting in the way of us living a more satisfying life? What if we're all looking for a future that can never live up to our expectations? This leads into 2 key words, hedonic treadmill and hope. And it's about the uncomfortable truth that many of us prefer not to dwell on. And that is that you and everyone you know will someday be dead, and all of your concerns and efforts in the grand scheme of things are pretty insignificant. We've imagined our own importance We invented our purpose, and we were, and still are, nothing. All along, we were nothing. This is quite a powerful statement, and this is directed at our ego. We can see from there that links back into the hedonic adaptation. Now, to get to the hedonic adaptation, we have to go back here to the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is a metaphor for human tendency to pursue one's pleasure after another. That's because the surge of happiness that's felt after a positive event is likely to return to a steady personal baseline over time. In our pursuit of happiness, we often find ourselves caught in a cycle known as the hedonic treadmill. This phenomenon is also known as the hedonic adaptation. It suggests that despite experiencing positive events or acquiring desirable possessions, our happiness levels tend to return to a stable baseline over time. So research shows that we may be able to increase our long-term sense of well-being through mindfulness, personal growth, gratitude, and investing in relationships. And by learning to savor simple pleasures as they happen, it may also help us hang onto happiness a little longer. So that increases our well-being, and that leads into mindfulness and gratitude exercises and happiness, which are all their own note that I have within my second brain here. So if I want to learn about being more mindful in my life, I can come into my mindfulness note and I can get a quick reminder straight away of what is mindfulness. And it's the practice that involves intentionally bringing your focus and attention to the present moment. That's very powerful. If I want to explore this concept more in depth, there is a bunch of books here and some action items that I can go through to be more mindful in my life. That's the same for gratitude. So we can right click and open gratitude, and I can close mindfulness. We can read about that as well. And we'll just close that one. So you get the idea that anything in yellow is its own note. These are just pointing out what will increase our well-being. If we're lacking happiness in our life, we're finding we're chasing our desires on the hedonic treadmill, it's not really helping us, then the tools that we need to use are in these notes here. We'll keep going on through the chapter. Rather than feeling satisfied, we feel a bit bored, and in response to boredom, we go on to form a new, even grander desire. Humans are unhappy in large part because we are insatiable. After working hard to get what we want, we routinely lose interest in the object of our desire. Now, I'm pretty sure this has happened to you because it happens to me all the time. You desire something, you go out of your way to get it, then you get it, and then you don't feel satisfied. Therefore, the cycle repeats, hence the hedonic treadmill. So in reflection, humans are amazing at looking forward. We may be the only animal that actually has the ability, and that's surely a blessing because we can plan for the future. But it can also be a curse because we can easily fall in the trap of not being happy. Think about all the things that you've accomplished. Maybe you've got a new job, you started a business, and that's awesome. But how do you feel about that now? If you check yourself, are you adapting towards not feeling like it's enough? And if you are, then you know that you're potentially stuck in the hedonic treadmill. You're lacking some mindfulness, gratitude in your life to make you more happy. Hope has seen people through some difficult times. There's an uncomfortable truth to life that many of us prefer not to dwell on. You and everyone you know will someday be dead, and all of your concerns and efforts in the grand scheme of things are pretty significant. No one likes staring into this void of the uncomfortable truth because you can easily slip into nihilism and think, if everything is meaningless, I might as well either stay in bed or consume the best drugs I can find and go play in traffic. As an example, Mark talks about Witold Pilecki. Witold Pilecki hoped to see an independent Poland. That hope drove him to join the resistance movement, volunteer to be arrested by the Nazis in order to infiltrate Auschwitz and help prisoners there. Throughout the ages, hope has been the main thing getting people out of bed in the morning. It's been sustaining them through serious, tough times. Whether it's for your own future or that of our family or a community, hope is a powerful driver of human behaviour. As a result, Will Todd was arrested and tortured for 2 years before being executed in 1948. So Pilecki's story shows us in the book just how powerful hope can be when everything in the world seems bleaker than bleak. But the problem is that hope is intrinsically linked to the future, and for a good number of people in the world, the present is better than ever. As a result, there's less sense of hope and more of a sense of having a lot to lose. And this might help explain why rates of anxiety and depression in the US have been going up in the past 30 years, while all of these improvements have been ongoing. The classic assumption that the rational mind is capable of making better decisions is wrong. There is a common misconception that we all have a better grip on life and be more productive if we could only get our emotions out of the way and put our logical minds in control. It turns out this isn't the case though. If we look at our emotions, we shouldn't necessarily trust our emotions. We should make habits to question them. Habits are regular, repeated behaviors, practices, and routines. Habits can also be fixed ways of thinking that come from repetitive thoughts. Habits often develop subconsciously, sometimes without awareness or intention. Breaking bad habits, whether behavioral or cognitive, can be challenging. It can also be hard to form new habits, but very much possible by using repetition and establishing behavioral patterns. Breaking bad habits and forming positive replacement habits is important when working towards goals. If we go back to emotions, we can see we have 3 parts of our brain. We have the thinking brain, the emotional brain, and the body brain. The world is much better now than a couple of generations ago. The scientific approach has one big flaw though. It speaks to our thinking brain, where logic and reason rule. It doesn't speak to our feeling brain, where our emotions reside. Making the right decision takes some real negotiation because it's all too easy for the feeling brain to take over and decide that eating junk food is actually a good idea. Your brain is key to your intelligence. There are many different ways to define and measure intelligence. Because it involves many kinds of thinking and uses many parts of the brain. Intelligence includes things like processing speed, memory, empathy, creativity, and connectivity. Mark talks about there being 2 travelers in your conscious car. You've got your thinking brain and your feeling brain. So self-control is an illusion. It's an illusion that occurs when both brains are aligned and pursuing the same course of action. It's an illusion designed to give people hope. The thinking brain gives rise to our thoughts, beliefs, and judgments. Looking at our emotions, we shouldn't necessarily trust them. We know that. And the reason we shouldn't is because there's no such thing as a bad emotion. There are only bad reactions to emotions. For example, if you feel angry, you can be destructive when you hurt yourself or others. But anger can also be useful to protect yourself or others. Fear is frustrating when it prevents you from doing something important, but fear is helpful when you're being chased by a tiger. Joy can be corrosive when used as a sense of superiority over others, wonderful when shared when something good happens. Shame is harmful when it causes you to judge or hate yourself, but good to prevent you from doing something inappropriate. And curiosity is dangerous when mixed with desires, but amazing to explore the world and life. Reactions to emotions have a tendency to create cognitive distortions. And some of these cognitive distortions include all or nothing thinking, blaming others, catastrophizing, emotional reasoning, fortune telling, labeling, magnifying the negative, or minimizing the positive. If we explore these cognitive distortions in more depth, we can see that all or nothing thinking leads to black and white thinking. People either love you or they hate you. Blaming others, holding others accountable is easier than taking responsibility for our own actions. Focusing on the worst, most unpleasant outcome, emotional reasoning, just because you feel it doesn't make it true. Emotions are not reliable indicators of our reality. Fortune thinking. One thing you can be certain of, you can't be certain of nothing. We assume we know what will happen. labeling, making judgments about someone's personal character based on small experiences. Magnifying the negative. Emotions cause tunnel vision. When we magnify the negative, we can ignore anything positive that might have happened. Minimizing the positive. When you downplay your accomplishments by insisting anyone could have done what we did, we are downplaying the positive. Some other cognitive distortions can be mind reading, and this is an attempt to assume we know what someone else is thinking. Overgeneralization, assuming your situation are based on isolated past experiences, which leads to unrealistic conclusions with little supporting evidence. An example of this could be stereotypes about various kinds of people. The most common are and socially destructive. Self-blaming, the belief that everything is your fault. Self-blaming is another form of self-absorption. Should statements, thinking you should have done something different sets unfair rules and expectations on yourself and others, which leads to feelings of guilt and anger. 4 laws govern our emotions and can make hope a losing proposition. The first law is every action, there is an equal and opposite emotional reaction. Let's say something bad happens to you, like getting punched in the face. At that moment, a moral gap opens up between what you think is fair and just and what's actually happening. Your natural response is as strong as the punch itself. You feel that you've been wronged, get angry, and want to close the gap by getting even. But what if you couldn't? That leads into the second law. Our self-worth equals the sum of our emotions over time. When people who are unable to act, they come to see pain as the new normal. Unable to close the moral gap, their brains instead make a moral shift that causes them to believe they deserve to be hit. This leads us into the third law. Your identity will stay your identity until a new experience acts against it. The fourth law, emotional gravity, states that the people in your personal orbit tend to be a lot like you. Most people want the same things, like good food and a roof over their heads. But unfortunately, we tend to focus on the relatively small differences that separate us, rather than those larger commonalities. We're drawn to people with the same specific likes and dislikes as us, and we start conflicts with those who don't share our preferences. With these laws governing us, you can see how even the most hopeful among us can end up unable to change or get stuck believing that we deserve bad things. And that can keep hope forever out of reach. All belief systems create problems, so it's better to accept life on its own terms. If you ever wanted to start your own religion, all you'd need to do is follow a few basic steps. First, you'd start your own religion, sell a particular kind of hope to hopeless people unhappy with their lives. You'd create some rituals for your people to follow. For example, the pursuit of money, political power, narcissism, or some other human fable. Corruption is inevitable, even if the religion was begun with the best intentions. It may sound cynical, but it isn't hard to see that religions, including ideological belief systems like capitalism or communism, all end up corrupted by the all too human individuals behind the scenes. A religion creates a belief system that creates hope. This leads back into the first best idea, what's in it for me. We also need to highlight that just like any other kind of belief, for hope to be good, something else must be seen as bad. A hopeful person, after all, is essentially saying, I'm unhappy with how things are now, and I hope they change. So while it may feel like hope gives things more meaning, it really just creates more unhappiness and conflict. Mark goes on to say that hope gets in the way of living a satisfying life. People's happiness has unrealistic visions of a perfect future. Pure logic doesn't lead to best decisions. And Mark also highlights that putting AI in control might not be such a bad idea after all. There is a mention in the book of a German philosopher who saw a fatal flaw in any belief system that is run by fallible human beings. Accepting life and death for what they are, warts and all, stop avoiding the uncomfortable truth of death and insignificance. His belief was amor fati, which translates to love one's fate. Immanuel Kant suggested a way of life and a way of being an adult that complements Friedrich's amor, fati. 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant looked to a future in which the world peace would be achieved under a global government. This essentially served as the inspiration for the United Nations. He was also an early proponent of the idea that every single human being has an inherent dignity that deserves respect. Immanuel Kant had a simple formula for humanity. Act that you use humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. And what does this mean? Well, it means that people should not do things simply in the hope that their behaviour will lead to a favourable outcome. Every act should be an end unto itself, taken without the expectation of receiving something in return. The pursuit of happiness is both a risk to democracy and impossible to achieve. Winston Churchill once said, "Democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others." Democracy is still the best system since it both recognises the corrupting nature of politics, allows other social and ideological beliefs to exist within it. But hope and the pursuit of happiness aren't really compatible with democracy. In fact, by pursuing happiness, we're actually putting democracy in danger. Democracy is still the best system to flourish. We need these virtues: honesty, courage, and humility. So we've established that democracy and politics have a corrupting nature. We've also established that democracy allows social and ideological beliefs. We can summarize that Mark believes that democracy is dangerous due to the pursuit of happiness, because the pursuit of happiness is essentially the avoidance of pain and discomfort. It's never dealing with the difficulties of life, such as people with different opinions. People are increasingly unwilling to accept the discomfort of opposing views these days, and that spells trouble for democracy, which is a big part of the problem. In the pursuit of happiness, it leads us into the blue dot effect. The blue dot effect suggests that our mind is conditioned to look for threats and issues, regardless of how safe and comfortable our environment is. The better things get, the more we nitpick on even the smallest of issues. The size of the problem does not determine our emotional reactions to the problem. The blue dot effect is everywhere. It affects all perceptions and judgments. Everything adapts and shapes itself to our slight dissatisfaction. And that's the problem with the pursuit of happiness. Pursuing happiness is a value of the modern world. At a certain point, innovation shifts to diversion and freedoms diminish. When considering the reasons for today's high levels of anxiety and depression, we shouldn't ignore two major culprits: advertising and a kind of diversion that's disguised as innovation. So anxiety and depression comes from advertising. In the late 1920s, products began to be pitched in ways that exploited a person's pain point or insecurities. The question wasn't how can we convince them our product is worth buying, but rather how can we convince them that our products will make them feel better about themselves. Advertising influences our mood, and this changed significantly in the 1920s when, for the first time, advertisers began targeting the emotional brain instead of the thinking brain. We can link this back to the first part, or the first best idea of this book. We can recall that Mark reminded us that there are two travelers in our conscious car, a thinking brain and a feeling brain, and self-control is an illusion. When diversion is disguised as innovation, it presents freedom, but freedom is dependent on distractions, and distractions diminish our freedom. And in the modern age, we have an abundance of these diversions. We're all obsessed with using technology because it makes things easier to do. But this leads into compulsive behaviours. What true freedom comes from is reducing things in our life, like when you delete your social media account to free up your time and attention. When your sense of well-being becomes dependent on distractions, creature comforts, and unnecessary technologies, you're actually moving in the opposite direction for freedom. As troubling as it is, we're willing to give up so much freedom in return for convenience. There may be a silver lining to these technical distractions. With the abundance of diversions we now have, we're becoming obsessed with using technology to make things easier to do. But we're also developing new compulsive behaviors in a way we use technology, which diminishes our freedom. AI is likely to change our lives, and maybe not for the worse. AI clearly is incredible, and it and algorithms are already expanding into many aspects of our day-to-day life. You've all probably heard of ChatGPT and how it's currently taking the world by storm. We have other AI tools available to us, such as Perplexity, Claude, Google's Gemini Advance, and we even have personal assistants called Pi. Human beings aren't as logical as algorithms. Maybe AI will convince people that we can, in fact, treat the world around us much better and still be very prosperous. Maybe AI will be the thing that finally helps humans reach a post-hope world and see beyond good and evil, to find the something greater that finally puts an end to ideological and religious warfare. It's probably best that we just go ahead and bow down to our new AI overlords now and let them run things as we deem fit. So if there's one thing you should hope for, it's that we don't blow ourselves up before we can make the changes that give us the chance to be the best version of ourselves. Manson has some tough words for people obsessed with comfort, ease, life hacks, and happiness. But his advice is constructive and meant to keep us focused on the here, the now, and the things that really matter. Thank you for joining me in this journey through Mark Manson's thought-provoking book, Everything is Effed, a book about hope. I hope this summary has provided you with a deeper understanding of Manson's perspectives on finding hope and meaning in an often chaotic and challenging world. If you've enjoyed this video and found the insights valuable, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more book summaries, Obsidian tips, and personal development content. Your support and engagement are what keeps this channel going. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections on the key ideas from the book. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.